Hello once again, and welcome to another edition of the SaskAgToday.com Roundtable. I'm joined by the 620 CKRM Regina Agri-News Director, Ryan Young, as well as the Chief Agricultural Editor for SaskAgToday.com, Kevin Hursh. I'm Doug Falconer, Agriculture Director at GX94 in Yorkton. And looking back at the week that was, Kevin, the StatCan production report for principal field crops came out. Were you surprised by any of the numbers you saw in it?
Market analysts had long thought and predicted, and observers, that the StatsCan estimate based off satellite imagery was too low, and this survey of producers was going to increase production levels, and indeed that's what happened. Some believe that, for instance, canola now at 21.8 million tons rather than 20 million tons. Some believe that's still too low, and over the next couple of years, StatsCan could still revise those numbers as they see how sales and exports proceed. So the trade had thought a lot about these numbers coming in bigger, and that was somewhat priced into the market. But when the announcement came and the numbers came out, it's certainly been a very difficult week for prices, particularly with canola that's dropped throughout the week. And I would believe, based on what I've seen, that typically now under $13 a bushel for the cash price at many delivery points.
Yeah, we saw the ICE futures canola drop about $30 per metric ton over the course of the week. Ryan, you said the numbers in some of the local elevators were down quite a bit as well.
Yeah, it was specifically with Bunge's Moose Jaw Terminal. The cash price there, it dropped. I think it was Wednesday into Thursday. It dropped like $16.20 a ton. So really a rough week for canola over here around the Regina area.
And Kevin, also this week you had a story about farm debt and where that's headed. And it looks like a lot of farmers out there are carrying an awful lot of debt.
Yeah, debt numbers continue to pile up, and people are of a couple different minds about this. The value of farm capital continues to increase as well, so debt to equity levels or ratios aren't changing a great deal. But what is changing, especially if you look back historically, is how big of an expense the interest on farm debt is becoming, and it's a growing percentage of farm expenses. And I think it's certainly something to watch. If we ever saw a significant increase in interest rates, this would become an area of quite severe pain, in my estimation, for those producers that are carrying high debt loads. It's a really, the debt load is certainly not equitable. There's some producers that operate with little or no debt. There's others that are maxed right out and at the end of what they can borrow, and most of the others are somewhere in between. So it's really not a burden that's shared equitably across the farming communities. But overall, farm debt and the expense from the interest is certainly becoming a bigger share of the expense side of the equation.
Ryan, of course, this week, Canola Week was held in Saskatoon, and I believe you had a chance to monitor some of the goings on there.
Yeah, a little bit of it. One particular example that comes to mind, there was a report on the presence of some insect pests around the province, and from what I was able to read and kind of gather, grasshopper numbers, for example, they weren't as prominent as they were, say, maybe a couple of years ago. So that's kind of a positive sign. As well as a little bit of a less of a presence with Bertha armyworm and some other pests that aren't coming to mind right now. But of course, you're going to have pockets of areas that, are an exception to the rule where they had a lot more compared to others. But kind of from what I gathered, it was kind of a positive report when it came to the pests.
Kevin, you farm in that southwest part of Saskatchewan, which is often ground zero when it comes to grasshoppers. Was that much of an issue in your part of the province?
No, it was amazingly quiet for grasshoppers and adult grasshoppers compared to what we've seen in previous years. And when you go back into 2024, there was lots of field edges trimmed off, a fair bit of spraying. This year, very limited, and when the grasshoppers were getting into the adult stage and flying around, you saw very few of them. It was amazing how the population had crashed. And I've just got the grasshopper survey map pulled up on a side monitor here from Saskatchewan Agriculture, and the hotspot seems to actually be not necessarily, it's more between west central and southwest Saskatchewan. There's a pocket there, but compared to previous maps with a lot of red ink showing severe grasshopper potential based on adult hopper counts in the fall, grasshoppers look to be a more isolated risk and a much smaller risk going into the following year than what we've seen the past number of years.
Also, Kevin, last week, railway performance, according to the Ag Transport Coalition, was pretty good. But this just past week here, it looks like things are starting to slow down. Do you suppose that's because of the colder weather, or what do you figure there?
I suspect that's the case. The cold weather or colder weather, we're not really in the grips of a real polar vortex that's likely to still come at some point. And in all fairness, railway performance has been very good for a number of weeks with the percentage of shipper requests filled has been well above 90, 95, 96% in some cases, but now is starting to slip in this past week of reporting. So that's an area to watch. In many cases, our exports are running a little bit below what they were at this time last year as far as total tonnage. And now we know that the crop was bigger than expected, and there's more grain to be moved than the industry thought going forward. So that's a bit of a concern. If we get a tough winter with lots of cold weather and some bigger snowfalls, it will be a concern if the railways can't keep up.
Also this week, Ryan, you had a chance to speak with Dr. Gillian Meyer from the University of Saskatchewan regarding the status of veterinarians in Saskatchewan and, of course, across Western Canada and even across the entire country, and the fact that there's a bit of a shortage. What did you glean from that interview that you did with her?
Well, one of the biggest challenges when it comes to the lack of veterinarians isn't really the fact that there isn't a whole lot of people applying for the Western College of Veterinary Medicine. She said quite the contrary. There's lots of applications that they get every year. The problem is there's just isn't enough space. There isn't enough seats to bring a lot of people in and hopefully graduate to become veterinarians. They have a specific amount of seats for Saskatchewan students, about 20 if I'm not mistaken, about 40 for Manitoba, and about 20 some for BC as well. Could be off with some of the numbers there, but more or less, that's kind of what they have available right now. And she said ever since she graduated from the 80s from the same college, the size hasn't really changed at all. So that's kind of one of the biggest challenges facing the profession right now. And another thing too, they bring in some internationally trained veterinarians to try to be that stopgap in the shortage. But a lot like other professions like doctors or nurses, if you don't come from an accredited school that Canada considers accredited, you have to take a series of exams and tests to show competency in order to practice here in Canada. So that could be another factor in the problem. One of the other things that kind of stood out too, aside from the interview, was some numbers that the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association put out on their website. It was from another report, but they said that the number of job openings for veterinarians across the country would total around 5,000, whereas job seekers would be around 4,300. So there's a shortage of 700. So that's a bit of a concern, and we know that if it continues to linger on, which they expect until 2031, it's going to have a major ripple effect across the country. When it comes to the not meeting the demand for animal care, as many more people are getting more pets, more dogs, more cats. On the agricultural side, more livestock. So if we don't get the situation handled soon enough, it could turn into a bigger problem.
Kevin, it sounds like they just need more space and then the funding to fund more seats as well.
Yeah, one thing that should be noted, it was or is the Western College of Veterinary Medicine, and Alberta used to be part of this coalition, but Alberta a number of years ago started its own veterinary college in Calgary. But it's still not enough veterinarians, and beyond that, the veterinarians that do come out, while they may, some of them, many of them may start out in a rural area, the money in veterinary work and the ease of labor in veterinary work is with companion animals in the cities. It's not in the livestock in rural areas, and that's a real tough go for veterinarians. People will pay untold amounts of money to keep their arthritic dog living a few more years. But in the livestock industry, it all has to be based on economics, and you're dealing with large animals that are difficult to handle, risk of injury, hard on bodies. So it's also a problem as to get veterinarians that are dedicated to the livestock industry rather than going to where the job pays better, which is companion animals.
All right, and I guess that leads right into another large animal being elk. And there was an elk hunt that just recently wrapped up here in Saskatchewan, Ryan, and it sounds like it stirred up a bit of controversy.
Yeah, you could probably call it coincidence, maybe not, but it seemed like around the time that the antlerless elk season was occurring between November 20th and 27th, there was multiple reports of elk that were shot and left to waste. And that's not specific to one area. It's actually happened in a few areas around the province, around the Northwest and Rabbit Lake, another area around the Nipawin Conservation Officer area, as well as in the central part where Humboldt conservation officers kind of cover that area. So it's kind of concerning, actually. Um, from a hunter's perspective, I was a hunter myself for many years. We have a moral obligation and ethical obligation to not only, I guess, hunt the animals, but also harvest the meat as well. To just simply leave them is just unacceptable. And that's something that the executive director of the Saskatchewan Wildlife Federation, Todd Smith, said was it's unethical and it's unacceptable and also illegal as well. There's consequences for that. But unfortunately, some of those cases, they do get left unresolved because, it's out in the open area. Like, who's going to be a witness, right? So there's other factors at play. But interestingly enough, on the SAS Tips Facebook page, they had 3 of the latest posts were basically the same cases, but just in the different areas that I just mentioned. And you look at the comments section, and people are not only angry that these incidents are happening, but also, some of them put the blame on the Ministry of Environment. They suggest or even go as far as to say, like, it's the Ministry of Environment's fault for, orchestrating all of this, and the conservation officers are cleaning it up, which simply I would find is not the case. The government said that they put in this special season for the elk, to kind of address the conflict between agricultural producers and the wildlife. They've heard for many years complaints of wildlife coming onto property and damaging property or damaging grain bags. That's a more common complaint. And they want compensation for that or something to be done about it. So the government figured, well, we'll give you this opportunity to, hunt some wildlife, and hopefully that controls the population in your area. So it's just unfortunate that it kind of resulted in all of this. We'll see where it goes. Todd Smith said that some conversations with the Ministry of Environment is kind of in the plans to see what they can do in the future. But he said while they understand that the government, he understands rather the position that the government took to address the problem, but felt it could have been accomplished in a different way.
Kevin, I know you're a farmer as well. I remember you probably remember back in the day when you had wooden bin floors, and of course the deer would chip away at them and help themselves to wheat. That they can be an issue out in the farm.
Well, it's a whole range, and certainly where I come from, it's not elk. I've never seen an elk in my country, but I actually do see moose. Which, if 20 or 25 years ago, if you said in my area that you'd seen a moose, they would have accused you of spending too much time in the local bar. But there are moose numbers in things like mule deer and even antelope in my part of the world seem to be quite low. But balancing how much the hunt should be in what species and what area must be quite a balancing act. But like Ryan says, every hunter has an obligation to harvest the meat ethically, and that goes for all of the species. And we still have to give a balance back and forth. There's always going to be some tension between landowners and wildlife and potential wildlife damage.
All right, and finally on today's show, just recently, the Horizon School Division won an award through the Education Ministry. And Ryan, you had a chance to speak with the Director of Education of the Horizon School Division about that award, and it had something to do with agriculture.
That's right. Yeah, I spoke with Kevin Garinger, who's still the Director of Education. I remember he was still in the title when I was in school, so he's been there for an awfully long time. But yes, it's a really good, feel-good story. He was telling me, this whole process leading up to winning the Lieutenant Governor's Award started a few years ago when he found out that the school division kind of ranked very low when it came to agricultural programming. And that's something that they wanted to address and try to make agriculture a part of their identity, since, he felt that they're literally in the heart of agriculture country here in Saskatchewan. So they kind of overhauled some of the programming there. And he mentioned, a specific example around Beaulieu and Punishai, where the two communities kind of work together on making a chicken coop and a community garden and doing all these hands-on things as part of the curriculum, which is really cool to see and really good to hear, because, those skills are valuable not only just in agriculture, but also for life. And who knows, you could parlay some of that stuff that you learn into a career in agriculture. So again, it's really nice to hear. And also just, thinking about when I was in high school, the only thing that was offered was just a traditional agriculture class that you just learned the basics of ag on the grain side and the livestock side. And that was really about it. There wasn't really anything hands-on or incorporating any indigenous agriculture into the mix. But it's good to see that happening in present day. And he hopes that they can build off of that and make it even better in years to come.
And Kevin, of course, when it comes to agriculture, we know that there's a lot of farm kids out there who do end up wanting to continue farming, but I know there's been a push for city kids to get more interested in agriculture, not necessarily just farming, but in agriculture in general. There's plenty of agriculture jobs out there that don't involve actual farming.
Yes, and if you look at enrollment in the University of Saskatchewan's College of Agriculture, first of all, for many years now, it's been more females than males. And there's more and more people from an urban background with little or no direct ties to farming. But when you look at crop variety development, when you look at greenhouse gas emission measurements, when you look at environmental studies, or even taking agriculture so that you can get into veterinary medical school, there's just so many avenues and so many different jobs and permutations of agriculture that really a career in agriculture should be something that students within the high school ranks are more familiar with, so that they can evaluate that as one of their career choices.
Well, on that note, that'll conclude this week's edition of the SaskAgToday.com Roundtable. On behalf of Chief Agricultural Editor of SaskAg Today, Kevin Hursh, and Ryan Young, the 620 CKRM Regina Agri-News Director, I'm Doug Falconer, the Agriculture Director at GX94 in Yorkton, saying so long until next time.